Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namate Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha. Hare Krishna Prabhu's Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Welcome back to Srila Prabhupada Arpanda Acharya. We're going to fearlessly launch into Lesson 8. It's the beginning of the Prayojana section, deepening our love for Srila Prabhupada. Lesson 8, to love is to cooperate. Here we go with a brand new title slide for Lesson 8, to love is to cooperate. It was only very recently that I realized that this really is the climax of the seminar. There are 10 lessons in the seminar, but this is the most intense lesson because it's the hardest thing to do in Kali Yuga. Okay, introduction. Srila Prabhupada's well-known desire that we cooperate to spread Krishna consciousness to every town and village was more than a farewell request as he was preparing to leave this world. It was a theme he voiced continually during his 12 years of non-stop preaching around the globe. Yet, in spite of Prabhupada's mandate that we work together, cooperation can be hard to find in the age of quarrel, where non-cooperation too often rules. In this key lesson on cooperation, we'll see up close why cooperation can be so elusive, as well as what we can do to foster it. So there's Srila Prabhupada dancing in ecstasy with his followers at the San Francisco Ratha Yatra. Famous photograph, 1974, July, August, right around this time of year. Our god sister Vishaka Devi tells how she tried to climb up on the cart to take some close-ups, and even though she had a BBT pass and she was fully authorized to do that, some Prabhu would not let her up. So she resigned herself to going out of the field away from the cart, but lo and behold, Vishaka reports, she found a spot out in the field that was even better than if she were up close. So she stood on a chair, and with her zoom lens, she got off what now some very famous shots of Prabhupada at this Ratha Yatra. So this image of Srila Prabhupada, whom the devotees are cooperating to please, is a reminder that devotion to our founder Acharya and his mission is the key to finding the unity that we will need to survive over time and take Lord Chaitanya's message to every town and village. Before we talk about cooperation, let's just see how Prabhupada defined love in a famous anecdote Shruta Kirti Prabhu tells. There's Shruta behind Srila Prabhupada in his constitutional position, massaging Prabhupada at Bhaktivedanta Manor inside this time in the summer of 1973, enjoying a light moment there with His Divine Grace and Bali Lordan Prabhu. So Shruta tells in his book, What is the Difficulty, that soon after joining Srila Prabhupada as his servant, he was lamenting that he lacked the intense love for His Divine Grace that the devotees displayed, for example, at airport receptions. And he told Prabhupada this after a huge LAX airport reception. And so concerned about his new servant, Shruta had just recently come aboard as Prabhupada's personal servant. Concerned about his new servant, Prabhupada asked Shruta Kirti if he liked serving him. So Shruta reports that he said, "Oh yes, Srila Prabhupada, I like serving you very much." So to that, Prabhupada replied, so you just do your service. That is all that is necessary. This is what love means, to do service. And of course, that's how Prabhupada defined bhakti. Not just love, not just devotion, but devotional service. It's a very practical expression of love. Now, that said, it's really a measure of our love when we are asked to serve cooperatively. So the next slide. To serve cooperatively is the test of love. Determined that ISKCON not repeat the tragic breakup of the Gaudiya mission after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance, Srila Prabhupada admonished his disciples to cooperate, perhaps most famously at the time of making his final will. As recorded in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita and in TKG, that's Tamal Krishna Maharaj's diary, TKG's diary, on May 17, 1977, Srila Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan to prepare to leave this world. He had tried so many remedies and strategies and cures, and nothing was working. Prabhupada could sense that his manifest pastimes were winding up. So they returned on May 17th. After Srila Prabhupada told TKG he wanted all GBCs to come to witness his final will, Tamal Krishna Maharaj replied that he was sure they would all come because they loved Srila Prabhupada so much, to which Prabhupada replied famously, quote, your love for me, said Srila Prabhupada, will be shown by how much you cooperate to keep this institution together after I am gone. So that's the quote as it appeared in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, which Tamal Krishna Maharaj himself gave to Satsrup Maharaj to go in. Years later, when Tamal Krishna Maharaj, about 20 years later in the 1990s, when he published his own diary, he reported that on the day that Prabhupada signed the will, so that would be 6 days later on May 23rd, Prabhupada echoed this earlier statement about his disciples' love for him. He said it a little differently. Here's how he said it on May 23rd, the day of the will signing, as reported by Tamal Krishna Maharaj in his diary. Srila Prabhupada emphasized, quote, your love for me will be tested. How after my departure you maintain this institution. We have glamour and people are feeling our weight. This should be maintained. I like that. I like that tested. Love untested sometimes is revealed as not true love at all. It's just some shallow sentiment. So we have glamour. What does Prabhupada mean by glamour there? Well, we have prestige. We're not going away. People can see we're some group that's substantial. We're a group that's to be reckoned with. People are feeling our weight. This should be maintained. Actually, after Prabhupada said that, I didn't put it on the slide, then Prabhupada said, not like Gaudiya Math. After Guru Maharaj disappeared, so many so-called acharyas came up. So Prabhupada was always hammering us with this theme of cooperation, not just at the end. Here's an example of some statements Prabhupada made about cooperation. One is early on and one is in the middle. Here's the early on. Quote, when you do something in cooperation with the Lord, that is called bhakti. That was in a Seattle lecture on the 9th of October, 1968, very early on. Prabhupada goes so far as to define bhakti as doing something in cooperation with the Lord. And then in 1973, ahead of myself. In 1973, in a letter to Babru Prabhu, who is now Ashram Maharaj, Prabhupada wrote, quote, "The test of our actual dedication and sincerity to serve the spiritual master will be in this mutual cooperative spirit, to push on this movement and not make factions and deviate." So again, that cooperative theme. So now to discover some keys to cooperation, let's enter into Srila Prabhupada's, I call it a devotional dialectic. You know, this dialectic where you have a thesis or a point, and then you have an antithesis, a counterpoint, and then you have a resolution or a synthesis. So I call this Prabhupada's devotional dialectic, to see if we can discover some keys to cooperation. Okay, so his thesis is cooperate. So what's the counterpoint? What's the antithesis? That's the next slide. But don't expect utopia. Prabhupada is very pointedly making a point there in the image. And there in the bottom of the image, I've shown a very interesting scene. You may recognize it from the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam or even Krishna book, where Akrura, who circumstantially is in the employ of Kamsa, just as Bhishma and Drona were circumstantially in the employ of the Kurus. Akrura, a pure devotee of the Lord, he has been deputed by Kamsa to go to Vrindavan to bring Krishna and Balaram to Mathura, where Kamsa hopes that his wrestlers can finish off Krishna and Balaram. But Akrura's internal mood is that he's even though he's working for Kamsa, so to speak, he knows that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and that he's also in his heart, and that he will know Akrura's true inner feelings for him. And he's hoping that they will accept those inner feelings and overlook the external circumstances. Now there, he's collected Krishna and Balaram from Vrindavan. He's going to Mathura, and there you have the purest devotees imaginable, the gopis, and they're doing, like they look like the original Occupy movement here. They're just occupying the space in front of Krishna, in front of Akrura's chariot, and they're saying, in effect, as we would say, no way, Jose. There's no way you're going to take Krishna and Balaram out of Vrindavan. And they're protesting. Akrura, your name means not cruel, but we think you are very cruel. Akrura. Krura means cruel. Akrura means not cruel. How can you even think of doing this? Don't you know that Krishna and Balaram are our life and soul? So I put this image here because it very nicely resonates with a 1972 letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Atreya Rishi Prabhu, who was then on the GBC, a householder from Iran, Iranian American, who was a very qualified person actually, had an MBA from Harvard. He worked for a very reputable company on Wall Street, and he wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada, Atreya did, and he wrote a letter complaining to Srila Prabhupada that, the devotees are always fighting, and he's especially thinking of his GPC colleagues. And the reason they're always fighting, he complained to Prabhupada, is because they're just impersonal. They're so impersonal, like impersonalists. And this is why they're so insensitive, and that's why they're always fighting. So Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter back that became rather famous because Prabhupada, in this letter, advised him about the nature of conflict. And first, Srila Prabhupada said this, quote, "It is not so much that because there may be some faults in our God brothers and God sisters, or because there may be some mismanagement, or lack of cooperation, that this is due to being impersonalists. No, it is the nature of the living condition to always have some fault. Even in the spiritual world, there is some fault and envy. But it is not the same as material fault or material envy. It is transcendental because it is all based on Krishna. Sometimes when one gopi would serve Krishna very nicely, the others would say, "Oh, she has done so nicely. Now, let me do better for pleasing Krishna." That is envy, but it is transcendental, without malice. So we shall not expect that anywhere there is any utopia. Rather, that is impersonalism. Prabhupada, in a bit of verbal jujitsu, which he was always very good at, took the very word that Atreya Rishi had used, impersonal, and turned it around to his advantage. Because Prabhupada's making the point that we're all everlastingly, not just in the material world, but we're all eternally individuals. And that's the first challenge to cooperation right there. Because we're all individuals. So we're naturally going to see things in different ways. But Prabhupada's key word there about why the jealousy that goes on even in the spiritual world is transcendental is it's because it's without, Prabhupada said, malice. There's no ill will. There's no ill wishing. Everybody's well wishing. So there's just an ever increasing competition to please Krishna. Now we're going to scroll in some more words in the letter to Atreya Rishi on the slide. People should not expect that even in the Krishna consciousness society, there will be utopia. And you remember, the word utopia comes from the Greek. It comes from Plato, actually. Utopos. It means literally no place. There's no place where there is perfection, as Plato is into the ideal world, where there's ideal economic system, social system, political system, educational system, philosophical system. So you don't actually find that in the material world, utopia. Prabhupada continues, because devotees are persons, therefore there will always be some lacking, just like he just said, fault. So here he used the word lacking, even in the spiritual world. And then he says, but the difference is that their lackings have become transcendental because despite everything they may do, their topmost intention is to serve Krishna. It's all about intention. It's all about motive. Now, Prabhupada is going to continue. Here's how he ended the letter to Atreya. It's really telling. Quote, the devotees of Krishna are the most exalted persons on this planet. Better than kings, all of them. So we should always remember that. And, like the bumblebee, always look for the nectar or the best qualities of a person. Not like the utopians, who are like the flies, who always go to the open sores or find the faults in a person. And because they cannot find any utopia, or because they cannot find anyone without faults, they want to become void, merge, nothing. They think that is utopia, to become void of personality. So, if there is sometimes slight disagreements between devotees, it is not due to impersonalism, but it is because they are persons. And such disagreements should not be taken very seriously. The devotee is always pessimistic about the material world, but he is very optimistic about the spiritual life. And here, listen how Prabhupada ends the letter because he's detecting some pride in his disciple that needs to be, some material pride that needs to be deleted, erased. So Prabhupada says this. So in this way, you should always consider that anyone engaged in Krishna service is always the best person, unquote. Now, well and good, Prabhupada's thesis, or if Prabhupada's thesis is that we cooperate, and his antithesis, his counterpoint, is not to expect utopia, then what is his synthesis? So that's the next line. Find unity in diversity. And as you'll see as the lesson goes on, this is what the whole rest of the lesson is about. It's kind of like the Holy Grail, the great quest for the Hare Krishna movement, finding unity in diversity. There's Prabhupada smiling with his hand in his bead bag on a nice grassy slope. So to find unity in diversity, to begin to try to find that, we're going to go to another letter, which also became famous because of this phrase being in it, that Prabhupada wrote to Kirtanananda Maharaj, who haven't seen the letter, but apparently from Prabhupada's reply, it sounded like Kirtanananda Maharaj had been reporting some dissension in the ranks, some factions developing. So Prabhupada was not pleased with that. And first of all, he wrote this, quote, material nature means dissension and disagreement, especially in this Kali Yuga. But for this Krishna consciousness movement, its success will depend on agreement, even though there are varieties of engagements. In the material world, there are varieties, but there is no agreement. In the spiritual world, there are varieties, but there is agreement. That is the difference. Now, your eyebrows might raise as you hear Prabhupada say that, but Prabhupada is going to clarify. Let's see here. Okay, now we're going to read some more of the letter on the screen. Quote, the materialist, without being able to adjust the varieties and the disagreements, makes everything zero. They cannot come into agreement with varieties. But if we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. This is called unity in diversity. Prabhupada's point about there being no agreement in the material world because there's no common center. Everybody has their fierce self-interests. The Prabhupada is saying if we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. This is called unity in diversity. Excuse me. And now he writes something that's become a very famous quote. I am therefore suggesting that all our men meet in Mayapur every year during the birth anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. With all GBC and senior men present, we should discuss how to make unity in diversity. Again, the Holy Grail, the great perennial quest to find eternal unity or everlasting unity amidst our incredible international diversity. And you see that when you go to Mayapur, everybody bringing their very, very different karmas to the table. Even if the medium of exchange is English, everybody's bringing their own mind, language, culture to the table. And it's really a challenge to get beneath that or beyond that to a deeper level to connect on the transcendental plane by trying to satisfy Prabhupada and Krishna. Now, here's how Prabhupada ended his letter to Kirtanananda Maharaj. Quote, but if we fight on account of diversity, then it is simply the material platform. Please try to maintain the philosophy of unity in diversity. That will make our movement successful. So what happens when we do succeed in finding unity in diversity, we actually find ourselves in harmony with Krishna's reality, a reality that, as it says on, for example, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj wrote a book, and it was titled Reality the Beautiful. So unity and diversity is actually the nature of the reality that Krishna creates. And Prabhupada makes a note of this in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 9, text 360, where Srila Prabhupada comments that the philosophical basis of, quote, unity and diversity is Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, the inconceivable and simultaneous oneness and difference of the Lord with His creation. In other words, unity and diversity is part of the Lord's universal order. Now, to try to still pursue this unity and diversity, unity and diversity may sound good in principle, but how do we find it in practice? Especially in the age of Kali, the age of disharmony. So let's keep going. Unity in principle, diversity in application. There is Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk. I believe it's Germany, although I haven't found complete proof of that, but it strikes me as being in Europe and perhaps in Germany. I have to verify that with some older German devotees. So to pursue unity and diversity, we need to identify timeless universal principles whose applications will vary according to what Prabhupada called time, candidate, and country. And here's where that phrase comes up in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is one of my favorite unity and diversity purports. It's from CC Madhya 23, 105. Quote, the teacher, Acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration and not the outward paraphernalia. And here's another excerpt from the same purport. Quote, it is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. We should not follow regulative principles without an effect, nor should we fail to accept the regulative principles. What is required is a special technique according to country, time, and candidate. Okay, so Prabhupada's giving a real hint there. Here's another quote on the same theme. This is from the Bhagavatam in Dhruva Lila. Quote, one has to consider the particular time, country, and conveniences. What is convenient in India may not be convenient in the Western countries. If someone does go and preach, taking all risks and allowing all considerations for time and place, it might be that there are changes in the manner of worship, but that is not at all faulty, according to Shastra. Now, even when we try to be sensitive to what Prabhupada calls time, candidate, and country, we can still strongly disagree about what are non-adjustable principles and what are adjustable details. So to continue pursuing Prabhupada's unity and diversity, which is really the key to cooperation, we must learn to be able to tell everlasting principles from adjustable details. So that's the next slide on principles and details. We should note that even advanced Vaishnavas sometimes disagree about higher principles, lower principles, and details. Here's an example, another example from Shruta Kirti's book, What is the Difficulty? Shruta reports that, quote, "We arrived in Manila, Philippines on October 11, 1972. Just before lunch on the 12th, I was massaging Srila Prabhupada in his hotel room. While I was rubbing the mustard oil on his back, Srila Prabhupada said," now this is just out of the blue, and he's referring to an incident that happened months earlier in Mayapur, where Prabhupada's godbrothers had been invited by Prabhupada to come to Mayapur to the land they had newly acquired to observe the installation of an Antashesh in the ground to establish the project. And it was interesting meeting, because on the one hand the godbrothers appreciated what Prabhupada was doing. He was doing actually what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had asked them all to do, to go out and preach and ultimately make international devotees all over the world. But they also had issues with him, and the biggest issue they had was that Prabhupada was allowing men and women to serve together in the same centers. And this was a big no-no. And to them, and they stood on a principle that Narada Muni enunciated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, famous 7th canto verse, where Narada Muni is saying to Maharaj Yudhisthira that the man is like a butter pot and the woman is like fire, and you put the butter pot too close to the fire and the fire melts. So to Prabhupada's godbrothers, the way Prabhupada was establishing these centers and allowing men and women to serve together in the same centers was really out of bounds. It was beyond the pale. It was contravening a principle. So, at the time, Prabhupada tried to tell them that when he came to the West, what he found was that from the time that they were little babies, boys and girls are freely mixing, and then they're educated in the same way. They go to the same schools together, they're educated in the same way. So Prabhupada was telling his godbrothers, you can't change a culture overnight, and anyway, outside of these centers, there's no supportive culture for Krishna consciousness in the West. It's a real wasteland. It's a desert of materialism. So what is he supposed to do? Deny half the human race access to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? So months later, that was in March, months later in October 72, Srila Prabhupada is saying to Shruta Kirti, quote, "My godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This is not done in India, but I have become successful because I made this adjustment." Now, for Prabhupada, he was contravening what he considered to be a lower principle for the sake of serving a higher principle. And we're going to see what that higher principle is in a minute. But I have become successful, Prabhupada said, because I made this adjustment. A huge statement. He then became quiet. And Shruta Kirti reports in What is the Difficulty that after Prabhupada said that, his mind, Shruta Kirti's mind, started to reel. He knew he had to ask a question, and he had to get the words right. So after some time, and he's massaging Prabhupada from behind him, and finally, Shruta says, finally I said, and here's what he said, "Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle?" Right? Adjusting a detail and tampering or changing, tampering with or changing a principle. And of course, that's the $108,000 question, right? That's really the source of a lot of our disagreements and tensions in ISKCON to this day. How do you know this? So, here's what Prabhupada said. At first, Prabhupada didn't even answer it. And the tension was building, the suspense was building. And then finally, Prabhupada said this. Prabhupada closed his eyes, and I continued to rub his body. Finally, he opened his eyes and responded. That requires a little intelligence. Notice the irony of Srila Prabhupada's remark. A little intelligence? I mean, even Prabhupada's own godbrothers did not understand the higher principle that Prabhupada was operating under. And we're going to get to that again in a minute. But first, we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, let me get that off because there was someone else in the room when Srila Prabhupada said that to Sri Kirti, and it was our Borijan Prabhu, our ISKCON educator, who wrote a wonderful book about his times with Prabhupada. It's called My Glorious Master. And when Borijan wrote that book, years after this incident, he made an observation. And here's the observation. Borijan Prabhu writes, quote, to foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life. That's one mistake. And to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. Fanaticism will cause havoc of a different nature. So when I'm presenting the seminar live, then I ask my audience, what is the danger of mistaking a principle for a detail? And then they raise their hands and we have some discussion, and then I ask them, what is the danger of mistaking a detail for a principle? So, of course, when we mistake a principle for a detail, then we're actually risking ruining our spiritual life by neglecting an important nutrient. For example, what's an example of a principle in ISKCON? Chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles. So if we don't do that, then we start depriving ourselves of the nourishment required to continue in spiritual life. And if we don't do that, then eventually we get weak until we're overwhelmed by material desires. Then, on the other hand, Borijan says, to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. Because the material world is such that everything's always changing. So continually, Krishna's message has to be represented. To represent means to represent, present all over again in terms of the ever-changing circumstances. So the details are always going to be changing. It's like the material world is like a kaleidoscope. Everything's changing. But we have to learn how to present the essence of Krishna consciousness so people can catch that according to their ever-changing situation so they can be reached. And then we bring them along closer and closer to Krishna. So fanaticism will cause havoc of a different nature. Now, that was 1972, that exchange. 2 years later, Srila Prabhupada, while translating the Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita, directly answered his godbrother's criticism about allowing men and women to serve together in the same centers. Prabhupada did this while commenting on Adi Lila, chapter 7, verse 37. So here is an excerpt from Srila Prabhupada's purport. Quote, Srila Rupa Goswami recommends, quote, one should fix his mind on Krishna by any means. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of this principle. So there are higher principles, there are lower principles, and then there are details, applications of those principles which must be adjusted. Not only can they be adjusted, they must be adjusted according to the ever-changing time, place, circumstance, or as Prabhupada says, country, and candidate. Now, Prabhupada goes on in the purport here, CC Adi 737. Quote, an acharya should devise a means by which people may somehow or other come to Krishna consciousness. First, they should become Krishna conscious, and all the prescribed rules and regulations may later gradually be introduced. And then he starts getting into it with the issue at hand. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we follow this policy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For example, since boys and girls in the Western countries freely intermingle, special concessions regarding their customs and habits are necessary to bring them to Krishna consciousness. The Acharya must devise a means to bring them to devotional service. So that's Prabhupada's highest principle. He's following Srila Rupa Goswami and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the highest principle is somehow or other get people interested, get them to fix their mind on Krishna, primarily by inspiring them to chant Hare Krishna. Take prasad, gradually get purified. And as we know from previous lessons in the seminar, this is exactly what Prabhupada did. Even when he initiated people, it was more about chanting Hare Krishna than about the rules and regulations. And that's why, as we pointed out, after a few initiations, one of the initiates said something like, hey, Swamiji, are there any rules to this club, to this thing? And then Prabhupada's famous reply, very good boy, like I thought you'd never ask. And then he posted in writing, all initiated devotees must. And not surprisingly, the first rule was not indulge in any kind of intoxicating habit, down to coffee, tea, and cigarettes, because that was the prevailing maya. The Lower East Side, New York City, the land of psychedelic, quote unquote, revelation. Okay, so to keep going with this pursuit of cooperation and finding unity in diversity, let's stop. Let's take a time out and see how far we've come so far. To deepen our love for Srila Prabhupada, which is the section of the seminar we're in now, Prayojana. In this lesson so far, we've been looking at his order to cooperate, his warning not to expect utopia, his advice to find unity in diversity, and now we've been looking at how to find unity in principles, diversity in the details of their applications, and we've been looking at the challenge to know the difference between higher principles, lower principles, and details. So when I do the seminar live, I say, so now in the following group task, it's a group exercise, excuse me, we'll put what we've learned so far to the test. What I'll do is I'll go to the next slide, and I'll just sort of walk you through the task and show you how we ask the devotees to try to apply what they've been hearing so far in a group exercise. Here's the first item of the task. Select an issue currently dividing devotees, either locally, regionally, or globally. First of all, I get them in groups, and people naturally, congregate where they're familiar with their friends. And then I tell them, okay, select an issue currently dividing devotees, either locally, regionally, or globally. Not a problem, right? In Kali Yuga, there's issues everywhere, locally, regionally, or globally. And then I tell them, now, identify universal principles accepted by all sides. In other words, identify principles that are operating, that are acceptable by people on all sides of the issue. There should be some constants, some things that everybody will have to agree has to be followed, observed. And this is the hard part. Identify universal principles accepted by all sides. I think I'm going to change that to acceptable to all sides to be clearer. Okay? So you got your issue, you've identified your principles, and now I ask them to devise diverse applications of those principles to help different people advance in devotional service. Okay, there's the diversity. Okay, you can find your unity when you acknowledge timeless principles. And once you do that, then you can begin to celebrate your diversity by seeing how, according to different people in different circumstances, different times, different places, how to apply, make your diverse applications to bring them to following those principles. And then I say, while you do this, while you're discussing in your discussions, stay focused on adjusting the details of different applications to serve the same universal principles. Make sure that whatever adjustments you're making, whatever diverse applications you're making of the principles, make sure that you're actually serving the principle, right? Don't just get lost in the relativities and keep people stuck on some level, but give them a way to keep advancing, adjusting the details of different applications to serve the same universal principle. Now once you've done that, present your solutions to the issues. Then we come out of the group huddles, and then we go to group 1, group 2, group 3. Okay, what was your issue, and what principles did you identify that were acceptable to parties on all sides of the issue, and how did you make your diverse applications of the principles to serve different populations, to serve different people in different circumstances, so they can gradually follow the principles. And now finally, here's a hint, because this is really difficult, actually, especially when people are trying to do this for the first time. So I say, hint, the blessings needed to find unity amid diversity are best received in a group of like-minded devotees. And now what we do from this last hint is we continue to explore this holy grail of cooperating by finding unity and diversity, by drilling down, and we look at now, what does it mean, like-minded devotees? Okay, so let's check this out. All right, associate with like-minded devotees. We have two very different images here on the screen. There on the left, of course, is Srila Sanatana and Srila Rupa Goswami's eternal associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they're certainly like-minded. They're sold-out servants of Lord Chaitanya. Okay, so how do we receive the blessings needed to find unity amid our diversity? Well, Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis knew how to find unity, and in his own way, so did, on the right image there, so did George Harrison. There's Bhakta George Hari's son, as Prabhupada liked to play with words, so he noticed that George Harrison's name can be divided like that, Hari's son. So there's George. He also knew how to associate how to advance in Krishna consciousness. The secret is to associate with like-minded devotees. Now, what do we mean by that? Usually we take like-minded to mean compatible with our own qualities, our own gunas, or our activities, our karma, things we like to do. Just like if you see young mothers, they might be pushing baby strollers together because they're going through similar situations in life. They both have young children, like that. Or you might come upon two different devotees, maybe they're both book distributors and they're talking shop, so to speak. Or there might be devotees who are involved in a rural farm community, and they're talking shop too, totally different shop, but they're connecting with that particular service. So that's how we usually think of like-minded, compatible in terms of our gunas or our karmas. But here, actually, Srila Rupa Goswami is going to challenge us to understand like-minded in terms of Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotional service. Here's how Rupa Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, actually defines like-minded devotees in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Quote, one must associate with like-minded Vaishnavas who are pure, more elevated, and realized. Wow. There is Rupa Goswami trying to get us right out of our comfort zones and right into our stretch zones. Not our panic zones, but into our stretch zones, where we're being asked to associate with devotees who are pure, more elevated, and realized. Now, according to Rupa Goswami, associating with like-minded devotees is one of the 5 most essential principles of devotional service. And then usually I ask the students live to identify the other 4, and as you may know, there's 64 devotional principles, and the 5 most essential are associating with devotees and like-minded devotees, living in a holy place, and that could even be your apartment. You've made your holy place a holy ashram, a sacred space to practice Krishna consciousness. Worshipping the deity, that's essential, especially in the Kali Yuga. Chanting Hare Krishna is essential. And also hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. That's especially our salvation in this age. It's those who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance, Srila Vyasdev says, shall get light from this Purana. Okay. Now, so Rupa Goswami says that these are the most essential. According to Srila Prabhupada, associating with serious and sincere devotees is most essential to advance in devotional service, as the following reference will now suggest to us. This is going to be an excerpt from the Prabhupada Bhagavatam Purport, Canto 4, Chapter 9, Text 11. It's a rather famous excerpt. Quote, anyone who is trying to be aloof from this Krishna consciousness society and yet engage in Krishna consciousness is living in a great hallucination, for this is not possible. Unless one is associated with devotees, his devotional service does not mature. It does not become distinct from material activity. Very interesting observation. Unless we're really practicing Krishna consciousness with other devotees, especially devotees who are serious and sincere, Prabhupada says our devotional service does not become mature. It does not become distinct from material activity. We forever orbit, circle our material attachments. We don't really advance effectively. As Prabhupada would sometimes say, yes, you can live outside the association of devotees, but it will take 700 years. Prabhupada would sometimes, quip and joke like that. So we need to associate with devotees, especially like-minded devotees who are serious and sincere. And now finally, in the next, I think, 3 slides, the last 3 slides of the lesson, we examine the quality of like-minded devotees that most enables their ability to cooperate. Okay? So there is Lord Chaitanya instructing Sanatana Goswami by the Ganges at Varanasi, Banaras. The humility of the Vaishnavas enables their cooperation. What I'm going to show you on the screen now here is a verse from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which Srila Prabhupada did not purport, but luckily he did purport it orally by the spoken word later. So first we're going to look at the verse that he translated, and it's kind of like a timeout. Lord Chaitanya is marveling at his listener Sanatana Goswami's qualification. Quote, "Since you possess Lord Krishna's potency, you certainly know these things. However, it is the nature of a sadhu to inquire. Although he knows these things, the sadhu inquires for the sake of strictness." So Sanatana Goswami is asking Lord Chaitanya all these questions. Lord Chaitanya is answering him. Famous, many chapters in CC, 20, 21, 22, 23. Long shiksha, long instructions. But in this particular moment, Lord Chaitanya is just taking as what we call a time out, and he's just marveling. You know these things, Sanatana, but you're just asking because you're a sadhu, and a sadhu, he knows, but he inquires for the sake of strictness. So then I say to the devotees live, I always say, what does that mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? The sadhu inquires for the sake of strictness. Well, strictness means, and we think of what Prabhupada sometimes would say, that somebody is Brahminical, for example. He's very strict with himself, but he's liberal toward others. So strict in the sense that the sadhu never presumes he knows everything. He's strict in remembering his absolute tininess. And in that kind of humble consciousness, the saintly person is always glad to hear deeper and deeper realizations from serious and sincere devotees, whatever their stage of advancement, about the Lord and his devotional service. So now we go to Prabhupada's oral purport of this verse. He translated it in writing in 1974. A couple of years later, when Srila Prabhupada was visiting New York City to celebrate ISKCON's 10th anniversary and the first New York Rath Yatra at the 55th Street temple called the Hare Krishna Building, Srila Prabhupada gave an oral purport to this exchange. Now, we did test the audio. Somehow it didn't come out right over the airwaves. So I'm just going to read the quote. And the acoustics are not good at that old 55th Street temple, so that's why we had a problem. So I'm just going to read the quote. You can follow along with me. So here's how Prabhupada purported it orally. Quote, "A sadhu, a saintly person, although he knows everything, still he remains very humble and tries to confirm from the higher authority. I think this is right. Is it not right? He knows it is all right," Prabhupada continues, "but still he waits for the higher authority to confirm it." So, this is the relationship, Sanatana Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Study all of them very nicely and be advanced in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's encouraging us to have this kind of humble attitude, and that's how we can advance. Okay, so since Sanatana Goswami was confirming his realizations with Lord Chaitanya, the mind, our material mind, might say, do we really have to confirm our opinions with anyone less than Lord Chaitanya? Do I really have to confirm my opinions with the devotees around me? So, to chasten that kind of arrogant mind, it's useful to remember, I find, the pastime of Dronacharya and Yudhishthira and Duryodhana. As you may remember, Dronacharya is the martial arts guru of the Kurus and the Pandavas. And when those boys were coming of age, they were given to him to train. But Drona thought it would be prudent to first test the boys, because he knew they were from two different camps. There were Kurus and the Pandavas. So, if you remember the pastime, Drona, it was an Ekadashi day, by the way, and Drona told Duryodhana, I want you to go out and find somebody greater than you, and don't come back until you do. And then to Yudhishthira, he said, Yudhishthira, I want you to go out, and don't come back until you find anyone lesser than you. Okay, go. So they left, and it was morning time, and they were gone all day. Now Duryodhana came back first, and it was still light, and he said, I'm sorry, Guru Maharaj, I couldn't find anyone greater than me. So that must have been quite a wake-up call for Drona. Okay, this is what I'm dealing with here. Here's the leader of the Kuru boys, the leading of the 100 sons. And so then he waited and waited until Yudhishthira came back. Yudhishthira didn't appear for the longest time. He came back, and the dusk was upon them, which is the far side of twilight after the sun has gone down and before it gets dark. That's called dusk. And Yudhishthira comes staggering in, and he's exhausted, and he's been out all day, and he says, I'm sorry, Guru Maharaj, I couldn't find anybody lesser than me. I thought I did. It's Ekadashi, and I saw somebody with grains. I thought he was about to eat the grains, but then he fed the grains to his animal. So I'm sorry, Guru Maharaj. I couldn't find anyone lower than me. So when we find our mind thinking that we can hear from anybody, that we know better, you know, those words that block learning, I already know that. But we find ourselves, the mind is so proud, it won't let us hear from any other except, you know, Guru and Krishna. Then we just have to remember incidents like this, as Prabhupada says in his purport to Gita 17:15, austerities of the mind. In his purport, Prabhupada writes that the mind can't be stopped, but it has to be diverted to Vedic literatures like Mahabharata, Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam. So this incident, this story is very instructive, because if I think I can't hear from anybody except Guru and Krishna, then who am I more like, Duryodhana or Yudhishthira? Well, the answer is obvious. We have to give up that Duryodhana in us and become more like Yudhishthira, who is more like the way the soul is naturally. So genuine Vaishnava humility is the platform from which we can make our best contribution, truly appreciate and learn from all devotees, and cooperate with them to please Srila Prabhupada, Guru, and Krishna. Now, we end the lesson by pointing out that just as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appreciated Sanatana Goswami's humility, so Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada appreciate and want our humble cooperation to spread the Sankirtan movement of pure love of God. Now, Prabhupada put this very powerfully and very beautifully in Sridham Mayapur. Here's what Prabhupada said. Perhaps I should put this on the slide. It's so powerful. But try to listen closely. This is in, let's see, yes, it's March 16, 1976. It's in a room conversation. For me, it's the ultimate cooperation quote. Quote, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is God himself. Krishna himself. He felt alone, unable to do this task. He felt, and Prabhupada is making a reference to Lord Chaitanya saying that I am the tree of love of God and I am also its chief gardener. I have so many fruits to distribute, I can't possibly do it myself. I need your help. So the Prabhupada goes on, he says, so this is the position. You are cooperating. Therefore, I am getting the credit. Otherwise, alone, what could I do? And then he quotes some Bengali. Ekaki amara nahi paya bolo. Oh, this is Lord Chaitanya saying, alone. I can't do it alone. Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu himself, wanted our cooperation. He is God, Krishna. And therefore, cooperation is a very important thing. Nobody should think that, quote, I have got so great ability, I can do. No, it is simply by cooperation. We can do very big things. And then Prabhupada quotes a well-known saying, a saying we all know, quote, united we stand, divided we fall. This is our motto. So be strong in pushing on Krishna consciousness, and Krishna will help. He is the strongest. Still, we must be combined together. Sankirtan. Sankirtan means many men combined together chanting. That is Sankirtan. Otherwise, Kirtan. Sankirtan. Bahubir militva kirtayeti sankirtana. Bahu. Bahu means many. Many combined together. This is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. So we give the last word on cooperation to Srila Prabhupada. And then the outcomes of the lesson. Well, if I've been clear in my presentation and you've been listening attentively, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to explain how love means to cooperate in devotional service. Explain how serving Krishna is not utopia. We should be able to explain how to find unity even amid our diversity. We should be able to explain the meaning of associating with like-minded devotees. Remember, it wasn't just in terms of our qualities and our activities, but in terms of our serious Krishna consciousness. And finally, we should be able to describe the quality of like-minded devotees, that most enables their cooperation to serve and please Krishna. And of course, that's Vaishnava devotee. Now, here's a preview of next Saturday. Transition. Before we look at different ways to access and develop our foundational loving relationship with Srila Prabhupada, in the next lesson we'll identify and dispel any unconscious misconceptions we may have about him. It's called fictional Prabhupada. Okay, that's the lesson, Ramananda Prabhu, and you can unmute everybody and we can take some questions.
Anyone have anything they would like to ask or add?
Dandavat, Suresh Prabhu.
Jai, Vidagdamarava Prabhu.
Yes, I like this segment very much. The principles and details, those of us that were around Srila Maharaj, he would express that it's, the relative and the absolute.
Right.
There's, like you say, there's some things that can, and that is a very big problem, not being able to distinguish between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And Burijan's quote was very good about that. Or no, actually it was a quote of Prabhupada, right, in his book.
What was it? Which one?
It was that if one about the detail and the principle.
Yeah, that was
and
Burijan.
the fanaticism.
That was Burijan.
That was Burijan or Prabhupada?
That was Burijan's observation of the exchange between Sridhar Kirti and Srila Prabhupada.
It was well. That's well done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This is. I think you can see. I hope you all can see why this is really the most intense lesson of the seminar. To love is to cooperate, because it's really the hardest thing to do. To distinguish the timeless from the relative. Yeah.
I would like to see some of your notes from when you open it up to the live groups, the kinds of things they come up with, when they're trying to understand unity and diversity. The differences that they run into. Because, there seems to be a lack of forum for, what is the expression? There should be impunity to bring up. I mean, there have been troublemakers in the past, there's no question. And I agree with Kalakanta Prabhu the other day that, the management's had to put up with a lot of crap, is what he said. And Krishna consciousness has not only attracted very intelligent people, but also some crazy people, unfortunately. And some of these people manage to put things online and all kinds of crazy stuff, and there's no resolution to it. They're just an attack mode. But I'm looking for the day when there can be cooler heads just to discuss things. And this is something that I think you're trying to do, is to bring that closer to reality, is be able to discuss certain things. Mm-hmm. And maybe, I don't know, did I get that right?
Oh, you certainly did. In fact, between my Atlanta presentation, which is going to be Janmashtami weekend, and the following weekend I'll be up in Detroit, during that week, in between those weekends, I'm going to be stopping in Charlotte and speaking with Hridayananda Maharaj, who is presently under a kind of quarantine, because of his Krishna West initiative. And without getting into Krishna West with him, I just want to approach him humbly as an old friend and say, Maharaj, can we discuss how to tell the difference, as you just said, with Sridhar Maharaj, the timeless, the absolute and the relative. Can we discuss, is there a way we can have a safe, cool-headed path to arriving at what's timeless and what's relative, so we can stop killing each other? So I'm going to be at his place near Charlotte, for a couple of days, and see what he has to say. So, we really need these kind of safe spaces to discuss these things. Otherwise, we're forever, coming from different sides of the spectrum and the pendulum and, what have you. And it's ships passing in the night, firing salvos at each other, and we don't get anywhere, So to love is to cooperate, find unity and diversity. Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing when he said, therefore I'm requesting that all, especially the leaders, when you come into Mayapur, you got to make this your perennial theme, how to find unity and diversity. He wanted this to be the overriding theme for every annual general meeting. So it's
right. Yeah, I was talking to Kalakanta, who has a very unique voice. Some devotees have found a voice that's I don't know if the right word is dispassionate, but it's a voice that is respectful but firm. It's not a diplomatic voice, and they can say things. I found this with Bhaktivedya Purnamaj also, somewhat. But he does it a little differently. He's working from sort of an intellectual point of view. Right. And he's able to say things that would normally be thought of as inflammatory, but because of the way he does it, it doesn't, create that sort of reaction. Mm-hmm. And Kalakanta Prabhu has also found this voice where he's able to venture into these troubled waters without, ruffling feathers, or I don't know, that's a crude expression, but we have to find that sort of voice to speak to each other and not get too excited about what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I tell you what. It's because of that voice that you're describing that I have made Krishna House my summer base. As you know, I moved from Hawaii after 10 years, and this is where I'm speaking to you from. And I find a very nice climate for advancing in Krishna consciousness here. And I'll give you a little hint that he gave to me about how to create that kind of voice.
Right.
He has dovetailed. I don't know if he told anybody this when he was giving class, but he credits Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right.
The classic in the communications field. He's a real believer in Dale Carnegie's techniques to how to let other people have your way, as he puts it. How to let other people have your way, which is kind of a funny turn of phrase.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but it's all about. It's a really good. I haven't done it yet. I have the PDF on my Nook e-reader, but I haven't actually taken the time to get into Dale Carnegie. But it's all about really sincerely creating that kind of space where people can find unity and diversity. So if you want to look up the old classic, you might try to read it yourself, because it's still on my list of things I have to do to grow up in Krishna consciousness.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's. Do you see how this lesson is really where we really have to come to terms with this if we're going to last and survive and thrive?
Yeah, it seems like we have to mature, on both sides. It just has to go. And Kalakanta offered up some hope that he says there's very. If you know some of these managing devotees, they're very, very self-sacrificing. They're trying like anything. So it's just a question of maturing, and being able to communicate without, the fireworks.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Maybe we can take another question or comment.
Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, Suresvara Prabhu. Thank you for the class. I was also very interested in this cooperation. It seems like that there are times and are devotees that are very difficult, though, to actually do service with. I mean, I go on Harinam on Saturdays with someone who actually, with a devotee who actually tells people they're going to hell because they eat meat. And I'm like trying to pull him by the sleeve. Come on, let's just keep chanting. But and finally, after several months of this, I maybe, if he remembers, got him to change his tune a little bit. But honestly, there are devotees that are hard to work with.
Yeah. Well, that's because we are who we are, and everybody is who they are. And as Prabhupada pointed out in that letter to Atreya Rishi, it's not that Srimati Radharani, I mean, he didn't say this, but the implication is it's not that Srimati Radharani and Chandravali necessarily get along all the time. They're very different kinds of gopis, and they're forever, there's tension there about how to please the Lord, but that's where they have their unity. There's no disagreement about who the greatest is, who the all-attractive is. So it's a great relief to me when I think how even in my liberated stage, it's not that I have to be able to relate to everybody, because I'm very tiny. I'm just a very infinitesimal part and parcel of Krishna. only Krishna, who is Akila Rasamrita Sindhu. He's the reservoir of all rasas. He's the reservoir of all relationships. Only He is infinitely capable of relating to everybody perfectly. So it's just natural, even in our pure state, we're going to be, associating with certain devotees, and of course being respectful to everybody. There you go. We always have to be respectful. But it's natural. We're going to just be attracted to certain kinds, and we just have to be respectful from a distance for other kinds of devotees. To me, that's such a great relief. I don't have to be all things to all people. Only God can do that. So, but we have to be respectful, and the key is defining all the other Vaishnava qualities is that humility. That's the first item of knowledge that Krishna mentioned in the 13th chapter, is the way out of the puzzle of the field of activities. This relative field we're surrounded by. Amanatvam, humility. Adambitvam, pridelessness. That's the whole key. Yeah, I feel your pain, and they feel the pain they feel for me, when people don't like me. What can I say? All I can do is I have to keep trying to follow the process and get purified. But the challenge is, despite all that, is to, as Prabhupada said in that letter to Babru, or now Ashram Maharaj, don't make a faction. Don't go away. He didn't want us to walk off in a huff. What does that mean? It means I can't get my way, therefore I leave? No. Maybe I just can't serve with certain groups of devotees, but I have to serve with another group. That was always Prabhupada's, bottom line solution. Okay, then just serve separately, whether he was talking to husbands and wives or GBCs who didn't get along or whatever. So there's a place for everybody. There's like-minded devotees everywhere, and as we do progress through the stages from Shraddha to Prem, we do learn things. Like you say, the person eventually changed his tune. Well, hallelujah, The highest principle is to fix the mind on Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna, that's what you're out there to do on Harinam, to share the holy name. The rules and regulations like no meat eating, they'll follow later if we are all attractive. If we're attractive, Krishna's all attractive, but in Kali Yuga very often, the religionist is not attractive. He's turning people away from God. So we just have to uncover our natural Krishna consciousness, and then people will be attracted. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you for
Anybody
that.
else?
I also appreciated your story from the Mahabharata about Yudhisthira and Duryodhana. And there's one little place in there where Duryodhana thinks, as he's going out, he thinks to himself, why does Yudhisthira get the easy part? It would be so much easier to find somebody lower than me. So thank you for that.
There you go. That's it. It's attitude, isn't it? Prabhupada says in a topic sentence of one of the last paragraphs of the preface to the Nectar of Instruction, advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So Duryodhana, perpetually angry, perpetually envious, never satisfied, even when the Guru gives him an instruction, right? And Yudhisthira, just the opposite, the attitude of gratitude. Jai. Okay. Ramananda, you must have a question. You're a very thoughtful person.
Not at this time. Well, I do have questions, but it's not in the right forum.
Okay.
Well, Hare Krishna, Suresvara, this is Mahesh.
Mahesh.
Haribol.
Jai.
Hey, thank you very much for your classes, and also I really wanted to say that I appreciate what you folks are doing there in Gainesville, the Krishna House project, especially when Kalakanta spoke the other day. And I think that's a really amazing project. The more I hear about it, the more I like it. I think that's a really, really special project. And it seems to me that you folks, especially Kalakanta Prabhu and yourself, you folks are empowered right now by Srila Prabhupada to take on this mission. It's not an easy mission. It's not like anybody can actually realize that. You have some special mercy from the Guru, and it's really very special. You really have the blessings there, because to create an ashram in the middle of a desert is not an easy thing to do, and I really appreciate that. Whatever you guys are doing is right by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and that's something to really consider. We ourselves, we have looking for years for ashrams or places where we could do some service, and to tell you the truth, there aren't very many out there. But it seems like what you guys are doing is very, very wonderful. And, we're really considering that if we ever go down that direction, to connect with you guys and do some service for you, for your community there, because it is very special. It's really good. And then the other comment I have to say about what Maharani was saying is it reminds me about an experience I had many, many years ago when I was on Sankirtan collecting Lakshmi, and one day I was just not having a very good time, and I was doing the same thing, sending people to hell. And the devotee that I was with, he says, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, this is what happened. People are not giving Lakshmi, so, I got very upset and started sending them to hell." He says, "Are you crazy?" He says, "We are trying to get people to go back to Godhead, not to send them to hell. You are nuts. With that kind of consciousness, you are going to hell. You better change your consciousness or it's going to get worse for you."
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson that that's not the way to go. And, either you change your consciousness, maybe you shouldn't be doing that activity, because devotional service is about helping people to go back to Godhead, not the other way around. That would be ridiculous. So anyway, that's my comment for that.
Thank you. Yeah, whatever's going on here at Krishna House, I'll tell you, it's Kalakanta Prabhu. He's really empowered by Prabhupada to create a safe space. This is just what Vidya was talking about. He's created a safe space for new people. We're talking about safe spaces for, us, older folks. He's doing it right from the get-go. He's letting people know it's okay to have doubts and questions and gripes and misunderstandings, and this is how you learn. So it's really cool how people are allowed to be themselves here and gradually, grow in Krishna consciousness. Kalakanta calls it 22nd Avenue South. So I heartily encourage you, if you're ever in our neck of the woods, please stop by Krishna Lunch and just get a glimpse, really taste the safety and the family feeling for Krishna House. It's really cool.
Yeah, but I think also the important thing is that you folks you have a morning program, and you are unifying people by having that morning program where the chanting of the holy names is a focus, at least for part of the time of the day. And, there are so many programs. People will come up with so many programs in order to attract followers. But to attract followers on the basis of a morning program where you chant Hare Krishna, that's very special. So, kudos to you. That's great.
Good point. It's not that we're not doing Prabhupada's program. We're creating a safe space following Prabhupada's program, just as Prabhupada would do when he was pioneering in different places. He was gradually bringing people to Krishna consciousness by allowing them to be themselves, but encouraging them to do those 5 essential things. What did Rupa Goswami say? Associate with like-minded devotees, worship the deity, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, live in a sacred place, chant Hare Krishna. Now, if you ever do come here, you'll see how Kalakanta does that in a schedule that works for the students. And it's tailored, it's customized, it's brilliant. And for example, I'll just give you one example. After the Bhagavatam class ends, and the Bhagavatam class ends like clockwork when a devotee wheels out the breakfast prasadam on a dolly, and then they sing the prasadam prayer. But guess what? If people want to keep discussing the issues from the class, breakfast turns into a kind of working breakfast where the discussion goes on, and the speaker, stays put in the chair, and over breakfast we keep discussing the class. It's a brilliant little adjustment, and at every step, Kalakanta has made these little tweaks to letting things go on in a natural way. But they're getting the 5 essential devotional nutrients prescribed by Rupa Goswami. Good point, Mahesh. Yeah, it's not that we're just a feel-good here and everything's watered down and nobody comes closer to Krishna. No, it's Prabhupada's program specifically tailored for this student audience. Okay, it's getting late. Ramananda Prabhu, I think I better move on unless anybody is really on the panic button there and needs to ask a question. How are we doing there?
Yeah, we are quite a bit over.
Okay.
Can I call you right after this?
On Skype? Okay. It's got to be short, though, because I got to keep moving with what's going on. Okay.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure, be done.
Short, very short. That quote where Prabhupada said, such differences shouldn't be taken very seriously. I'd put that in all caps on one of the slides.
All caps and bold. Yeah. One of the first things I heard when I came into Boston when I first joined was that Prabhupada said, if you have a good ship and a good captain, who cares who's on board?
Right. Well, that's what made it work. Really.
Yeah.
That's what made it work. You got to have a good captain.
That's it. Thank you for that. All right. Okay, Ramananda Prabhu. Thank you, everybody. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.